Imagine walking alone on a freezing night, the wind cutting through your clothes like a knife. The temperature? Negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. Your car has broken down and the nearest house is miles away. Your only option is to walk, hoping to make it. But what if you don't? What if you collapse miles from help and freeze? Solid. This is not fiction. This is the real story of Jean Hilliard, the woman who became a human icicle and lived to tell the tale. Welcome to Alex Reid's Strangest Files, where we dive into the strangest, most unbelievable true stories. Hi, I'm Alex. Tonight, we're unraveling one of the most chilling survival stories ever recorded. A nightmarish journey of survival against impossible odds. This is Frozen Alive, the Jean Hilliard story. It's the dead of winter, December 20th, 1980. A brutal cold gripped the town of Lengby, Minnesota. A small, quiet place where everybody knew everybody. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling all sound except for the howling wind. The air is razor sharp, and temperatures had plummeted to a deadly minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 30 degrees Celsius. It was the kind of cold that bites, that numbs, that can freeze flesh in minutes, that can steal the breath from your lungs, that can take your life. Jane Hilliard is your typical small-town girl with a kind heart and an adventurous spirit. She was only 19 years old when this story happened. She grew up in Lengby, where winters are usually brutal, but life is simple. She was raised in a close-knit family, was known for her resilience and determination. An ordinary teenager with dreams and a bright future ahead, Jean never imagined she would become the subject of one of the most baffling medical miracles ever recorded. She had been out with friends that night, enjoying a typical evening. Around midnight, she got into her father's car, a white rear-wheel drive Ford LTD, and began the drive home. The roads were treacherous, slick with ice, covered in drifting snow. An unrelenting blizzard had swallowed the road behind and before her. That night, no matter her precautions, no matter how careful she was, no matter how slowly she drove, this road was simply impassable. As chilling as it may sound, Jean had a meeting with destiny. A disaster was lurking in the shadows. Then, suddenly, it struck. Jean's car skidded out of control and veered into a ditch, leaving her stranded in the bone-chilling cold. The engine was dead. No heat, no way to call for help. Remember, the temperature was a brutal 22 degrees below zero, cold enough to kill in minutes. The road was deserted. No headlights, no sign of life. Just an abyss of white and the howling wind, whispering an eerie warning.
No one is coming.
Now, if you've ever been caught in freezing temperatures without shelter, you know the fear that creeps in, the isolation, the urgency. Jean knew she couldn't stay in the car. Without heat, hypothermia would set in within minutes. She would freeze to death. Through the darkness, she spotted a faint glow in the distance, her friend Wally Nelson's house. She thought it was half a mile away, but in reality, it was a grueling 2-mile journey. Doable, right? Well, she knew she didn't have another choice. Her only option? walk. So, she started walking. 2 miles through deep snow toward the home of her friend, Wally Nelson. Bundled in a winter coat, jeans, mittens, and cowboy boots, she continued, for better or worse, her desperate journey, the snow crunching beneath her unsteady steps. The cold gnawed at her, seeping into her bones, but she pressed forward. Each breath was a struggle, forming ice crystals on her scarf. Each step was agony, but she pushed on. What Jean doesn't know is that time is running out. The human body isn't meant to survive in this kind of cold. We can survive at minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit for just a limited time. But the exact duration depends on various factors such as clothing, wind conditions, and individual physiology. Without proper protection, hypothermia can set in quickly, potentially leading to a quick death. Jean Hilliard was in great danger, in the worst of conditions. First, she wasn't properly clothed to stay outside for long, and the blizzard made the cold unbearable. And before she reaches safety, something terrifying happened. To prove to you the danger in which Jean was, here are some scientific facts about how the body reacts to extreme cold. At minus 30 degrees Celsius, exposed skin can freeze in just a few minutes, causing frostbite. The body's core temperature will begin to drop rapidly, leading to an increased heart rate and blood pressure, shivering to generate heat, and reduced blood flow to extremities. As core temperature continues to fall, more severe symptoms will occur, like confusion and disorientation, loss of fine motor skills, and an eventual loss of consciousness. What happened to Jean followed this exact blueprint. Jean trudged through the snow, wearing, as I said earlier, only a light winter coat, gloves, and cowboy boots, hardly enough to protect her from the merciless cold. No heavy gear, no thermal insulation, just the sheer force of will keeping her moving. The temperature was deadly, every gust of wind slicing through her layers like a blade. Her boots sank into the deep snow, making each step an exhausting struggle. The night was silent, save for the sound of her ragged breathing and the distant howling of the wind. But still, she pressed on, step after step. After just a few minutes, the cold began its relentless attack. Each breath felt like inhaling shards of ice, the air burning her throat. Her muscles stiffened, her fingers curled involuntarily as the blood retreated inward, desperate to protect her core. Her pace slowed, her legs growing heavy as if invisible chains bound them. But she pressed on, one step, then another. Half a mile in, her mind started playing tricks on her. Shadows shifted in the snow. Her own heartbeat pounded unnaturally loud in her ears. The warmth in her body seeped away like sand through open fingers. She tried to flex her hands. Nothing. They were numb, unresponsive. The cowboy boots she wore, meant for dry land, not snow, felt like frozen bricks trapping her feet. The cold gnawed at her like a living thing, an unseen predator lurking just beyond her consciousness. At a mile, her limbs were beyond heavy. They were lead weights dragging her down, each step an agonizing battle against a force she could no longer fight. Her breath came in slow, shallow gasps, each exhale crystallizing instantly in the air, frosting her lips with a fragile white. Her vision blurred, the edges of her world growing dark, flickering between sharp reality and hazy unreality. Her body, in a desperate bid to survive, began shutting down, pulling resources away from anything deemed unnecessary. Her arms, her legs, her own body was abandoning them. Still, she forced her frozen limbs to move, each step a battle against the creeping numbness. Wally's house was there, just a faint glow in the distance, a promise of warmth, of safety. She reached for it in her mind, clung to it like a lifeline. But the cold wasn't done with her yet. It wrapped around her like an iron grip, tightening, pulling her down. Her vision swam, the light flickering like a dying ember, so close, yet slipping further away with every agonizing step. By the time she reached Wally's driveway, just 15 feet from the front door, her body could take no more. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she crumpled forward, face first into the snow, her body refusing to move. The last thing she saw before darkness took over was the warm glow of the house's porch light, so close, yet impossibly far. Her mind drifted. The pain started to fade. The cold, once unbearable, became strangely comforting. A deep, unnatural sleep overtook her, and there she stayed for 6 hours, encased in the ice, her skin turning pale and solid like marble. Her body temperature plummeted. Her limbs stiffened like a corpse, locked in place by the relentless freeze, in temperatures that should killed her in less than an hour. But somehow, she held on. At sunrise, around 7 a.m., Wally Nelson stepped outside, stretching against the frigid air. The snow-covered ground stretched endlessly before him. But then, something unusual in the snow caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothes, barely distinguishable against the icy white landscape. But as he stepped closer, he saw something that made his blood run cold.
Oh my God.
A shape, motionless. A person. Long strands of dark hair peeking out from the frost. And a face. Jean's face.
Oh my God, Jean! Oh my God, Jean!
Frozen stiff, her skin ghostly pale and rigid like porcelain. Her eyes wide open, locked in an unseeing stare, covered in a thin layer of ice. He rushed over, his heart pounding. Jean's body was ice cold, her limbs stiff as wood. He shook her, called her name, nothing. She wasn't breathing, no pulse. She was, for all intents and purposes, dead. Wally didn't hesitate. His breath came in frantic bursts as he and a friend struggled to lift Jean's rigid, ice-covered body into his truck. Every second counted. He floored the gas, the truck fishtailing on the icy road as he raced toward the nearest hospital, praying for a miracle. But deep down, he knew. Bodies this frozen don't come back. But something inside him wouldn't let go. Could she still be alive? The hospital was chaos. Doctors and nurses swarmed around the stretcher as Jean was wheeled inside. Her body was unresponsive. They scrambled to insert IVs, but her skin was like stone, unyielding, frozen solid. The thermometers? Useless. They couldn't even register a reading, her body temperature having plummeted beyond their measurable limits. A stethoscope against her chest picked up no heartbeat. They prepared to declare her deceased. Then, the miracle happened. A nurse checking Jean's wrist gasped. She felt something, faint but unmistakable. A pulse, barely there but steady. A ghost of a heartbeat barely flickering at an impossible 12 beats per minute. Just a whisper compared to the normal human heart's rate of 60 to 100 beats per minute. It was as if her body had hit pause, clinging to life in the deepest freeze imaginable. By all medical logic, she shouldn't have been alive. She wasn't just cold, she was on the edge of oblivion, suspended between life and death in a frozen limbo. But this faint, impossible pulse was undeniable, and it was enough for the entire emergency room to erupt into action. They had no roadmap for a case like this, no precedent, no guarantee. But they knew one thing. They had to fight the cold with warmth. They swathed her in heating blankets, their hands shaking as they adjusted the layers. Slowly, her skin softened, her body loosened. Warm IV fluids then trickled into her veins, their only hope being that her body would remember how to live. And then, they waited, watching, hoping, praying. Medical science tells them she's beyond saving, yet they refuse to give up. Her skin continued to soften, gradually regaining its characteristic rosy tone. Murmurs ripple through the staff. This shouldn't be happening. And then, a few hours later, the impossible. A sound, a faint, almost imperceptible murmur, then a twitch. A single jerky movement that sent shockwaves through the room. The doctors froze, eyes wide. Was it real? Could it be? And then, another noise, a shuddering breath. Jean was coming back. The human body should not recover from being frozen solid. But Jean's story wasn't over yet. Doctors monitored her closely, expecting complications. But, against every medical prediction, Jean recovers rapidly. By that afternoon, she woke up, not groggy, not confused, fully awake, her eyes darting around the room, her voice strong as she asked for water.
How are you feeling now, Jean?
Much better.
The doctors were stunned. This wasn't just survival, it was resurrection. Her body, which had been frozen stiff just hours before, was now warming rapidly. Her fingers, once unmovable, flexed. Her legs, which should have suffered severe frostbite, showed no signs of damage. Over the next 24 hours, color returned to her skin, and her speech grew steadier. Within days, she was sitting up, then standing, then walking, laughing with her family as if the nightmare had never happened. Jean's case truly is a medical impossibility. It defies logic. After 6 hours frozen solid, she should have severe frostbite, organ failure, or brain damage. Yet she speaks, confused but coherent. And the best part? No brain damage, no frostbite, no amputations. The worst she suffered was minor frostbite on her toes and fingers. It was as if the ice had never touched her. Her recovery wasn't just fast, it was incomprehensible. A few days later, she did the unthinkable. She walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet. No wheelchair, no lingering injuries. Her skin, once ice cold and lifeless, was warm and flushed with color. Her voice, once silenced by the frozen grip of death, was now steady and full of life. Doctors watched in awe. Nurses whispered in disbelief. The girl who had been frozen solid had not only survived, she had emerged unscathed. A living, breathing miracle. Doctors try to make sense of it. Some call it divine intervention. Others, an anomaly of human resilience. But one fact remains. Jean should have died that night. And yet, she didn't. And I may never know why. As of today, science cannot explain what happened to her that night. However, her survival can probably be attributed to a combination of physiological responses and external factors. As she walked through the extreme cold, her body likely cooled gradually, allowing her systems to adapt. As her body temperature dropped, her metabolism slowed down significantly, inducing a state similar to hibernation and reducing the need for oxygen and protecting vital organs. Severe hypothermia redirected blood flow to her vital organs, minimizing damage to peripheral tissues. while muscle rigidity from the extreme cold made her body feel frozen solid due to her muscles contracting severely. Despite her frozen appearance, her core temperature likely remained above freezing, preventing lethal ice crystal formation in her cells. Some speculate that alcohol in her system may have played a role in preventing her organs from freezing completely, hence delaying complete organ failure. Her survival was further aided by prompt medical intervention, where doctors carefully warmed her body. Additionally, the unwavering prayers and support from her community, while not scientifically measurable, may have played a role in her miraculous recovery. If you ever find yourself in a life-threatening, cold exposure situation like Jean Hilliard's, taking immediate action can mean the difference between life and death. Seek shelter as quickly as possible to escape the wind and freezing temperatures. If your clothing is wet, change into dry, warm layers to prevent rapid heat loss. Focus on warming your body's core first, your trunk, abdomen, and head, before your extremities to avoid shock. Use blankets, sleeping bags, or emergency insulation, ensuring your head is covered while keeping your face exposed. If you are conscious, drink warm, sweet, non-alcoholic beverages to help raise your body temperature, and apply warm compresses to critical areas like the neck, chest, and groin, avoiding direct heat on extremities. Have someone monitor your breathing, and if necessary, be prepared to administer CPR. Above all, call for emergency help immediately, as severe hypothermia requires urgent medical attention. To prevent cold-related emergencies, always dress in moisture-wicking layers, cover your head and extremities, stay dry, avoid sweating through overexertion, and maintain hydration and energy levels with proper nutrition. By following these critical steps, you can greatly improve your chances of surviving extreme cold conditions. Cases like Jean's have led researchers to explore therapeutic hypothermia in medicine, where patients are deliberately cooled to slow cell damage. But Jean's case, she wasn't just cooled, she was frozen. So far, any attempt to explain it has remained theoretical. Jean Hilliard's story remains one of the most mysterious survival cases ever recorded. Some call it a miracle, others an unexplained medical phenomenon. What do you think? Could science one day explain this? Or did Jean experience something beyond human understanding? That's all I have for you tonight. This was the first episode of my podcast, Alex Reid's Strangest Files. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to my channel and other platforms for more of the weirdest, most mind-bending true stories out there. You'll find all the links in the description. And hey, stay warm out there. You never know when the cold might come for you. Until next Friday, my fellow strangers, stay curious, stay weird,